Right, so you bought a drift car, and now you want to make the drift car, well, better. That way you can hang with the big boys and do all the crazy cool tandem stuff and all of that. Or maybe you're just finding that your car isn't quite performing to the level that you expect it to based on some of the other cars out there. I'm Devin from Dr. Garage. I'm going to share with you my 5 favorite modifications to make your drift car perform awesome and for you to make the most of your seat time. I've been drifting for over a decade at this point. I've driven all kinds of different cars. And I've found that some modifications, although they claim this high performance gain, really don't gain you much. I'm going to help narrow down the things that I have found make the most difference for me, as well as for newer drivers that I help coach and teach. Now, these modifications aren't in any particular order, they're just the top 5 that I recommend the most. The first modification I recommend is going to be more of a category, not a specific mod, and it is reliability modifications. I'm talking about things like better radiators and cooling fans, or maybe your car typically has a higher oil temperature, so oil cooler, things of that nature. You want to be able to drive your car for as long as possible so you can make the most of your seat time. You see, if you can do lap after lap after lap, ideally even hot lapping, you're going to be able to make adjustments from lap to lap, and you're going to remember the adjustments you made and get that muscle memory down. So anything that prevents you from getting more seat time is something that I would look at addressing. As a part of those reliability modifications, something I always look at is the reliability of your stock handbrake. You don't need a hydro, so don't go spending money trying to figure out how to get a hydro set up, unless there are some cars that the stock handbrakes just don't work well. But I typically find that getting a good working cable handbrake makes a huge difference. So that kind of falls into the same category as reliability modifications of, replace the cables, adjust them, replace calipers, things like that to make sure that your handbrake works properly. I know a lot of people are anti-handbrake use, and I used to be that way. And the thing about a handbrake is that it's a tool to be used when appropriate. And maybe some people use it too often, and maybe some people use it when it's not appropriate, but I find that handbrake is a useful tool for learning how to start or initiate a drift. My second modification I'm going to recommend is something that's going to help you improve your car control. It doesn't involve any modifications, your steering, suspension, anything like that. It's all about driver positioning. I'm talking about a good quality bucket seat and a good quality set of harnesses. Ideally, I recommend seats that are FIA certified or SFI certified. I want to make sure that you got a nice, safe bucket seat. Bucket seats or racing seats are crash tested and stress tested, so as long as you get one that's certified, that's what I would be sticking with. I'd also try and get something that's fixed back. The reclining seats, although you can get performance seats that do recline, I have had issues when after heavy use they have loosened up and just like collapsed back on me. So I would suggest a fixed back seat over anything else. And the same kind of rules I think go for harnesses. I would get something that is certified. There's a lot of high quality companies out there for pretty affordable prices for harnesses. Get yourself a good quality harness bar and put that in and you should be golden. Third modification, let's talk differentials. There's a lot of people who don't like welded differentials. There's a lot of people who love welded differentials, and there are lots of different types of limited slip differentials. So I'm gonna help you understand the better ones for drifting. Welded differentials are great because they're cheap and they're predictable. So if your car came with an open differential, you can take that out, find one of the local drift guys who'll be able to weld it up for you for pretty cheap. Usually it's like 20 bucks or a case of beer or something like that, and it's done and taken care of. And then it works great as long as it's welded proper. I've been drifting on a welded diff in my AE86 for 6-7 years. Yeah, something like that. I even know Formula Drift drivers who prefer to have a welded diff over a limited slip differential. So there's that. Limited slip differentials can offer some advantages to, you have more techniques available to you and more tools in your tool belt. But I think at a certain point when you've got too many more advanced tools, it can get overwhelming and then you don't end up driving as well. So just take that for what it is. Now let's talk about the limited slips. I'm gonna start with ones that are bad. Viscous limited slip, if you got a viscous limited slip, ditch it. I wouldn't drift with one of those. They are unreliable, they don't lock up well, they don't really work well for drifting. They work great for other types of motorsports. They work great for kind of road racing stuff and other autocross, things like that, but as far as drifting, they just don't lock up very well, so they don't work well. The next one that comes up a lot is helical type. Helical type can be good, but also unpredictable. See, they are a gear type of limited slip that as it winds up, the gears get tighter and then it it locks down, which can be okay. The problem with helical type is that anytime the suspension or anytime it becomes unloaded, it goes to an open diff. So you can be like on throttle, it loads it up, you got both tires locking pretty good, and as soon as you let off or decelerate a little bit, or you're sitting here trying to modulate throttle, it's gonna be unlocking and locking and unlocking and locking, and it can be very difficult. You're using more brain power to drive, and it just is not as predictable as, say, something like clutch type or a welded diff. When it comes to clutch type differentials, there are a couple of different types. You've got one-way, you got 1.5 way, and you got 2-way. A lot of the factory type of clutch type limited slip differentials are one-way locking, and then you've got 1.5 way locking at 2-way locking. The best way that I can really describe them is 2-way is the most aggressive at locking, 1.5 way is a little less aggressive, and 1-way is the least aggressive at locking. And so some people prefer a 1.5 way, some people prefer a 2-way. It's gonna come down to your own specific wants and needs. And if you're looking at differentials that closely, I would be reaching out to manufacturer and talk to them. Companies like Oskaiken and Kaz or Kaz, K-A-Z, or K-A-A-Z, they're great at helping guide you through what differential to choose, as well as a lot of the drift retailers, right? Hit up your favorite drift retailer, whoever it is. The fourth modification I want to talk about is going to be coilovers. For grassroots drifting or entry-level drifting, it's all about predictability and reliability. You want the car to do the same thing every single time. And I find that to be able to do that when it comes to coilovers or suspension is you want to buy something that's a high enough quality. You can spend thousands of dollars on a set of coilovers going to perform it fantastic. The question is it worth all that extra money? And well, that's going to be up to you to decide what your budget is. But when it comes down to buying a set of coilovers, I would only be looking at coilovers that are about the $1,000 new mark. If you can buy them used, that's great. But if you can spend a little more, it's going to be a little better. So things like about that $1,000 range. I mean, I run Megan Spec RS coilovers in that car. It's a little over $1,000. I think it was like $1,300 or $1,400. Well, that's a little more premium. Or you can get like something like BC Racing. Those are pretty great. They're tried and true for drifting. You know, you've also got Fortune Auto. There's a lot of brands that operate in that $1,000 to $1,500 range. They're gonna be fantastic for drifting. They're gonna be able to perform very, very well. So when it comes down to the lower budget coilovers, the shocks aren't tuned as well. They don't use as high quality parts. I've seen a lot of lower end stuff blow seals really quickly. They're not set up great for the factory, so you gotta do a bunch of fiddling to be able to get them set up right. Or I've seen them just straight up break or seize. I think my favorite coilovers right now are from a company called ANNEX. They're more of like a bespoke type of coilover. I have them on my other AE86 project. They got a lot of high quality things and a lot of cushioning and dampening that other coilovers don't seem to have. And they're great for like a street drift car because of all these extra features. I'm really happy with the quality of them on my other car. They make them for all kinds of cars, and so I've been looking at putting a set on my S13, and I'll probably end up replacing the Megan Spec RS on this car once they end up going out with a good set of ANNEX 2-way or 3-way adjustable coilovers. Number 5, we're going to talk about suspension arms. I can't say specifically what type of suspension arms you should buy for your car because it's going to depend on what your car is and what type of suspension alignment things you need to dial in. A lot of cars will come with some suspension adjustment from the factory or some alignment adjustment from the factory. And I would only be looking at buying different arms if you are trying to get different levels of adjustment in them or being able to adjust for modifications you've done or to make it drift, you know, a little better. Sometimes alignment is what it comes down to, and if you can't adjust your alignment to get it to good specs, I look at buying arms that will let you get it to those specs. A lot of people watching this are probably like, Devin, what the heck? Why didn't you talk about steering angle modifications? Well, you know what? It's a good thing to talk about, so we'll touch on it here at the end. When it comes to learning how to drift, I'm a bit old school in my mentality of what I think you need for angle. Now, don't get me wrong, I have angle kits on both of my cars from Just Engineering. Absolutely love them. Just Engineering angle kits are fantastic. They drive great. They give me like 70 degrees of lock. They correct a lot of suspension and steering alignment stuff, and they get it all dialed in very, very well. So how many adjust things like Ackerman and other things, the car just drives fantastic. However, the thing with tossing a fancy angle kit on a drift car when you're first starting, it can hinder your ability to progress. And let me explain a little bit. So like, the reason why angle kits are great for drifting is because it allows you to drive with more steering angle. And when it comes to competitive drifting, having the ability to have more angle can actually help you correct it in case you mess up. And that may seem like a great thing when you're starting out for grass steers. Why wouldn't you want a wider margin of error? Why wouldn't you want the ability to do that? Well, the thing is it's better to learn where your limits are in a way that you can't recover from it when you're first learning. That way you can learn how to lay down a good lead run. See, if you're constantly recovering using your angle, you may not realize what you're doing wrong as a driver. Or maybe that's a bad way to put it. You may not realize what you could be doing better. You see, when it comes to drifting, especially in low power cars, which is typically what entry level cars are, a lot of it's about carrying momentum. And if you're constantly over angling and doing what we call angle stalling, where you just scrub a ton of speed and then you come back, that disrupts your flow through the course. And if you're trying to lead another driver, when you're constantly doing that, can cause some serious problems and even collisions and accidents. And I've seen several cars totaled this way. I've even almost totaled my own car because of another driver doing this. But there are some modifications you can do to get more steering angle if you feel like it's going to help you. You don't need to get 70 degrees of lock, but you can do things like inner tie rod and spacers, which give you a little bit more rack travel to get you more angle. And sometimes when you do this, you find, well, then your tire, your wheel is rubbing in your frame rail or something. Well, so then you can widen your track width a little bit by doing like 1-inch extended control arms. That's a pretty typical thing I saw on S chassis and AE86s back in the day is you had a little bit of angle. Well, now you're having some contact with your wheel and tire. So now you got to bump it out a little bit. And 1 inch was like the magic number back in the day. Another thing that you can do that was kind of an old school modification is welding your knuckles or modifying your knuckles by cutting and welding them. You need to do things like correct your Ackerman angle, shorten them to get a quicker steering ratio, which will then also increase your steering angle. So there's some things you can do. They're kind of old school at this point because most of the time people are buying like off-the-shelf knuckles, which are just fine, right? Or there's a lot of bolt-on angle adapters, which are also a pretty good bang for your buck. But I would say don't jump to those right out the gate because it's gonna be better, I think, to learn the limitations of the chassis and figure out where that sweet spot is in the angle with the power and everything that you got to be able to carry momentum through the course. And then at that point, once you start learning that, then I would look at adding more steering angle so you can like do cool things like throw backies or come in really fast into an entry and throw a bunch of angle to scrub speed and then bring it back. That's a lot of fun and I love doing that. If you got questions on some of these topics, make sure to put it in the comments below. If this is helpful for you, like, share, subscribe, all of that. I also do have channel memberships. So if you look down in the video description, there's a link there to channel memberships. There's a couple of different options, different tiers, and each tier has different benefits or perks. So maybe you get some discounts on merch. Maybe I even get you into a private social media group to chat and discuss vehicle setup and maybe troubleshoot your own car. I can help you with that. If that's something you're interested in, make sure to click the link. Thanks for watching and see you next time.